Okay, we're recording. I'll call this meeting to order. It's the Affordable Housing Committee regular meeting of October 19th. It is 5:37. This meeting will be recorded, and the recording will be posted on the Town of Old Lyme YouTube channel. With us from the committee, we have Harold Thompson, Jen Miller, John Sagaro, Peter Cable, John Coughlin, Karen Winters, Tom Mortaliva, and Michael Foliano. Okay, we've got a pretty packed agenda tonight, so I'm going to try and move through it. The first item is the approval of the minutes from the September 21st regular meeting, which was sent out in your packet. Before we go to a motion, are there any amendments to those minutes that anyone would like to put forward? I'll go through everybody. Harold?
No. No, I have no comment.
Thank you, Harold. Jen?
Sorry. Those are no.
Thank you, Jen. John Zaccaro?
No.
Thank you, John. Peter?
No.
Thank you. John Coughlin?
No, thank you.
Thank you, John. Karen?
No changes.
Karen, any amendments to the minute?
No changes.
Thank you, Karen. And Tom?
Accept it as is.
Thank you. In that case, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of September 21st. Did I miss the motion? Is
Motion to approve.
that Harold?
Tom.
Okay. Tom? Okay. Tom made a motion to approve. Second?
This is Harold. I'll second that motion. All right, go ahead, Karen.
Okay.
Or who's it?
Okay, I've got Tom and Harold. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Harold?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Approve it.
Jen?
Yeah, I don't know if I can vote.
Right, that's right. I'm just going with what I have. You're right, Jen. Sorry. John Zaccaro. Were you at that meeting, John?
No, and I would abstain.
Okay. John Coughlin?
I approve.
Thank you. Karen?
I approve.
Thank you. And Tom?
Approve.
Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, moving on. Correspondence. I have one item to raise. We received an email from Cheryl Poirier via Karen Winters. I followed up with Cheryl. And in a nutshell, Cheryl is part of the Sustainable Old Lyme Group, and they are working on increasing the town's certification level with the state, which involves compiling some information on affordable housing. Now, what they're doing is an imperfect intersection with some of the work that we're doing. But I think there's an opportunity to collaborate with Sustainable Old Lyme, and they can probably use some of the work that we're doing, and we can probably benefit from some of the work that they're doing. So with that in mind, I just took a cursory look at their list. But I'd like to recruit a volunteer from our committee to work with Cheryl and the Sustainable Old Lyme Group, and then report back to us on how we might be able to work together and hopefully save some duplication of effort. Is there anybody who would be willing to do that?
Michael, this is Jen. I work with Cheryl on the sustainability stuff for the schools for Region 18. So I could do it. I'm not sure how burdensome we're talking about here, but if it's just bringing an understanding back to this team, I'm happy to do that.
Great. The first objective is of that'd be great. If you're already in touch with them, Jen, and you could at least explore this, I think that would be good.
I am. Thanks.
Thank you very, very much. Okay. One other item, not a major one. I submitted our section for the Old Lyme annual report to Michelle Dickey. The report covers fiscal year 2019 to 2020, which ended on June 30th of this year. So we didn't have a lot going on then, since we started up in late February, went on hiatus for a little bit, and then basically restarted in June. So there wasn't a whole lot to say. So what I did was I essentially just lifted the introductory section to the progress report that we submitted to the Board of Selectmen and cleaned that up and gave that to her as our annual report. So we're all set there. It basically spoke to our launch, how we organized, being disrupted by the pandemic, and then restarting in June. And that pretty much ended the reporting period for us, at least. Okay. Any other correspondence that anyone else wants to report? Okay. Hearing none, I'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is feedback from the October 5th meeting with the Board of Selectmen, where I was actually invited to run through our progress report and interim recommendations that initial recommendations that we submitted in late September. And also, I had a follow-up conversation with Tim Griswold after then for some follow-up items. So essentially, just to feedback, the report and the recommendations were very well received, and both of the recommendations regarding the McCulloch property and forming a standing affordable housing commission were accepted by the board. There was one question that came up during the time we had, and that was about if seasonal homes are included in the base number of housing units reported by the Census Bureau that are used as the basis of the affordable housing calculation for the town. So we have, as of 2019, it was 5,021. And Tim asked if that included seasonals or if they were excluded. I had a look at the census documentation on their data dictionary, and my reading of that was that they didn't have any specific guidance on seasonal homes, but they did have a thing on vacant homes. And basically, my reading is that vacant homes are counted as a unit if they are intended to be occupied at any point, which I inferred to mean that seasonal homes are counted as part of the total. But I did want to follow up and confirm that. And Jen, I was going to ask you specifically. I know you've had your fingers in those data as well.
Yeah, my only understanding is that it was from the tax records. So if you're paying tax on a dwelling, then it is included. That was what I was told.
Okay. So that ties in. I guess we could check with Melinda and see if her count. It won't be exact because the 5,021 is as of 2010, which predates her. So if it's close, I think we can. I think Tim said there's something like 1,200 seasonal homes. So if it's more like 3,800 than 5,000, there's that kind of gap. We can infer that. Okay, good enough. So enough of that little diversion. So on the McCulloch property opportunity, the Board of Selectmen agreed to pursue the option to develop the 2 envelopes for affordable housing, and they're going to be recruiting a project committee, which will, at least on the basis of the discussion we've had, will work separately from our committee. Tim mentioned that they'll be looking for someone from open space to join the team. I'm thinking that it would be good to have someone from our committee on the team as well. And this may also be a good opportunity to get some of the other interested folks that have made inquiries about membership on our committee involved in the process. So the board has this one, and I'll keep tabs on it, and please stay tuned as this plays out. The next thing was the commission. Again, the board was approved the notion of going forward to stand up a commission that would be responsible for some of the ongoing compliance and deliberations around affordable housing and be essentially a center of expertise on that. I started doing some background research based on a conversation with the town council that Tim referred me to, and he suggested that we look at other towns' ordinances as a template. We're going to need to draft an ordinance for Old Lyme that the Board of Selectmen is going to have to approve. And then we're aiming for the end of January, which is kind of a triple convergence of our committee is going to be sunsetting around then. The annual town meeting is typically at the end of January when the ordinance would be approved. And also the end of January is when the Board of Selectmen typically makes appointments. So we're going to work towards that end of January for having an ordinance approved by the Board of Selectmen that can be subsequently brought before the town. And hopefully that'll all come together. I've already made a few calls to some of the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments and talked with the folks in Lyme and also with Rivercog to try and get hold of some other towns' ordinances. I've already seen a few of those, and there's some choices to make. For example, Lyme formed their commission as a development partner with the state under General Statutes 336F, which provides some structure to the commission, but it also has some strings attached. And I'm not sure if Lyme has found that to be beneficial to them, but I've got a line into them, and we'll be having a conversation. Also, turned up our friends in the Northwest Corner, Salisbury again, who have a commission and have also set up a nonprofit partner with the commission. And as part of that, I actually found on their website a really comprehensive study that was done back in 2010 by a committee similar to theirs. Really an excellent body of research that I will distribute after this meeting to us. And I'll probably put it on the agenda for next time. It's like 130 pages, so it's a pretty heavy read, but they did a lot of work. There's some legal analysis in there. There's some demand analysis that looks pretty good. So all of that pulled together, this is, I think, pretty good news. We can have some confidence that there'll be a successor to pick up our work where we leave off and take it to the next level, which would include an 830J compliant plan in 2022. So that's the core of the feedback from our report and recommendations. Also, as an aside, we had talked about this I think back in June. The Economic Development Commission, I heard, is probably going to be on the Board of Selectmen agenda for their next meeting on November 2nd. And we had discussed inviting someone from the EDC to come talk to us about their report and some of the findings they had around housing. And we had thought that the EDC would eventually be reporting out to the selectmen, and we could listen in. And I think that opportunity is going to be coming up on November 2nd just as a heads up for all of us. I'll plan to join into that, and then the recording and minutes will be out there as well. And then if we have any follow-up questions, we can maybe have a more targeted discussion with the EDC afterwards.
Excuse me, Michael.
Go ahead.
The EDC is the Economic Development Commission. How does affordable housing going along with the economic development?
They actually did a study and actually commissioned Advanced CT, I think, to do a study. And they had a finding, the reports are up on their website, and they had a finding that diversity of housing was a factor in economic development. So I think that's how we link in with them. And that included, no, I didn't see anything very specific or quantitative, but I'm at least going to listen in to hear more about what their finding was. And it may be something that we at least want to acknowledge in our report, if not linked too hard. So that report's up there if anybody on the EDC page of the town website, if anybody wants to have a look at that. Okay, so back to our progress update and the initial recommendations that were accepted. Any questions or discussion on that? I can go around quick and just see if anybody has any comments or questions. Harold, anything additional?
No, I mean, that sounds good. I've looked at the EDC. We've had discussions with the Economic Development Commission on several topics, but the diversity of housing never came up as like a strong point in their proposal. So I'm curious about that. But thank you for what you've done so far. This is great. Thanks.
Thank you, Harold. Jen?
Yeah, I agree with Harold. No questions. Thanks, Michael.
Okay. John Zaccaro?
Yeah, no questions, and I reiterate everyone else's sentiments. Thank you for all of your efforts.
You're welcome, and thank you. John Coughlin?
No questions, and again, thank you for the help.
Thank you, John. Karen?
Michael, I'm not exactly sure. When we go further in the meeting, I'm just reviewing our agenda for tonight. That's when we would go over the document that starts with the Old Lyme current housing status, or is now the time for those questions?
I think later in the agenda.
Okay, then I'm good for now.
Great. Thanks, Karen. Tom?
Now you got a clean sweep. I'm good.
Okay. So we got a lot to stay tuned for, and I might be calling for some help with this ordinance. I'm still making some connections and figure out exactly what we have to do next, but we're going to have to be moving along on that. And this one, the Board of Selectmen is going to be pursuing the McCulloch thing, but the ball's in our court to move this commission recommendation forward. So careful what you ask for, I guess. But that's good news. Okay, moving on to agenda item 5. We have the legal and regulatory research readout from John and from John Zaccaro and Harold. So, John, I'll turn it over to you, and you're muted. John, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry, you can press the space bar to unmute, but if you click on something else, it mutes again. So I have a document prepared that's fairly well along, and it has 5 sections. The one is the impact of 8-30G on the zoning review and approval process and congruity with the plan of conservation and development. These are taken right from our charge. 2 is the methodology for determining the percentage of housing units classified as affordable. I mean, these are rudimentary, I think, at this point in our process. The 3rd is the requirements for a procedural path to a moratorium grant by the state, which is a very interesting section that was amended in 2017. So that section, the first 3 sections are pretty well done. The moratorium section, I'd like to double check the language in light of the amendments because it was a little bit complicated. And then 4 is, are there any proposed or pending changes to the legislation? That's an easy one, that's done. And then clarify what is meant by public health and safety. And I've started reviewing, this is where I'm at, reviewing the cases that describe what is or what is not And actually the term is not public health and safety. It's actually a substantial public interest in health or safety. And there are quite a number of cases that describe what is or what is not in specific instances, not like a general definition. But, in this case, it was a substantial public interest. In this case, this particular fact pattern was not. So that said, with the understanding that it still needs some additional material in the last section and a double check on the language in section 3, I could circulate this and then Harold would get a shot at taking a look at it. I've been still hesitant to send it, just directly to Harold, between Harold and I, because of the FOIA requirements. But it's up to you. And also, I should confess that I haven't looked at this since before the last meeting that was scheduled. After you told me that I didn't have to rush. That's the worst thing you can say to an attorney. If you take away the deadline, it's over. So I put it down and you didn't look at it.
Sorry.
John, just out of curiosity, what are your FOI concerns?
Well, that we might be having a public meeting by exchanging communications without granting the public access to that meeting and fulfilling all of those requirements. I did attend the roadshow for that was done at the town hall, and I've actually been to that same roadshow a couple of times. And the laws have changed over the years, I just don't. I didn't want to risk it, by doing that without having it in the public record, and I wasn't sure exactly how to achieve that.
So I've done some more research on that, John, and my understanding is that if you were to send out a draft document, clearly a draft, and that we did not deliberate on it, but you sent it out as a pre-read,
Yep.
then
That's not a problem.
then that's not a problem.
So I can send this to Harold before we present it to the full committee, or
Right.
okay, if you're comfortable with that, then that's it is clearly designated as a draft, although it doesn't have a watermark as such.
Right.
But
Harold and Peter, you have more commission hours on you than I do. Is that consistent with your understanding?
Excuse me, I was comfortable.
I was just checking if you're comfortable with that. You've got more commission time at the helm than I do.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with that. I mean, the thing of it, first of all, it's going out as a draft, and there's no, like you said, there's no decision, there's no vote. We haven't made a motion on anything, so that is, to me, it's not a problem. It's information, and we're not withholding anything, and we're not making any decisions. And as far as, I think, John, you're right. All this, all the discussion about the availability of information and what constitutes a group is becoming much more restrictive, because it would be, years ago, it was like if you had 5 members on a commission, and if 3 of them, a majority, got together, that was a meeting.
Yeah.
And I think it's very restrictive to say that one-on-one, we can't discuss things just because it could be, in violation of those regulations. So, but I think if you send it out with a watermark as a draft, and that's no problem.
okay, then I will do that as soon as we're done here. I can put a watermark on. Is Word, Microsoft Word, okay, or do you want?
Oh, perfect. No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay,
Awesome.
then I will do that.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks, John. If you to your findings, I have couple of questions that have come up in the past, and it would be helpful if you've covered these in the discussion briefly. So one is, does an 830G appeal effectively provide amendments to?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up, Michael?
Yeah. This, I'm gonna mute everybody. Is that better? Oh, I muted you. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay.
Well, then I'll stop complaining about it if you
All right. In any case, does 830G provide an avenue for the appeal process to effectively override zoning and allow a multifamily development to be built in a single family zone?
Well, that's that would depend on what the application is for they would have to be applying for a zone change. And I believe if I could just consult my outline a little bit, I believe it does apply to applications for a zone change.
Okay.
It's not so much that it overrides the authority of the zoning commission. It's just that if the zoning commission doesn't meet the burden of proof requirements for a denial, then the Superior Court could actually, as the Court of Appeals, could actually make the decision. That's the way the zoning appeals under this section work.
Okay. That's really helpful. It doesn't override, but it does provide a path to grant a zone change and puts the burden on the zoning commission. Got that. Okay. The second question, this has come up before, that arcane procedure for awarding points towards a moratorium. That's distinct from is that distinct from the exemption qualification? And is the exemption qualification basically a flat 10%? Or is that point system like exemption as well as moratorium?
Yeah, they are two distinct processes, and the moratorium is for a limited period of time, and there are a number of requirements, including compliance with 8-30J, which or actually compliance with 8-30J gives you a slightly different threshold for the points. If I could, let's see. Yeah, 1.5 as opposed to 2% based on the point system for a moratorium. So adopting, making the path feasible for Old Lyme is possible, but adopting that affordable housing plan would be a key element of obtaining a moratorium, in my opinion. I think it's a very important step.
Very good. Thanks. And just as an aside, you had mentioned the applying for a zoning change. I saw recently in the Connecticut Mirror, there's an article about how in Woodbridge, there's a group that's put in an application for development, actually looking for a zoning regulation change in the town, a broad regulation change in the town, not just on the property that they're going to be developing, if I'm reading it correctly. I'll send that out, if that may be of interest.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'll go around. I've asked my questions. I'll go around and see if there's any more for you, John.
Sure.
Harold, anything additional?
No, not right now. I think the big question I think is about zoning, and that's something I think we have to resolve. And I think zoning is aware of that. I think they're looking at some of the regulations as far as making some changes and making it easier for some additional affordable housing. That's very encouraging. Thanks, John.
Well, anything you'd like to add? I know you had some background work on this too earlier in the year.
Say that again?
Is there anything you'd like to add? Because I know you did some work on this earlier in the year.
Nothing right now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John. Jen, questions for John and Harold?
No, thanks, John. I think that the restrictive land use policies comes up, I think, again and again in all kinds of studies by Harvard and national studies. So it's not just Old Lyme that restrictive land use policies, town by town, are the number one reason they cited, anyways, in the literature for a lack of affordable housing. So it might be good to have a more in-depth conversation with people who are familiar with the zoning in the town to maybe brainstorm some ideas, something like that.
And I know this turned up in Peter's work too. And Peter, anything to add there, or any questions?
No, I think some of this may come up if we have any discussion on setting goals. I mean, I think this is part and parcel of that discussion.
Good, and we'll get to that. I know from reading your background, or this will come up again later in the meeting. Hey, John Coughlin. Thanks, Peter. I see you're muted, John. I'm going to unmute you from this end and try again.
Did this work? I'm good. It was very informative. Thanks, John.
Okay. Karen?
This is, I learned a lot about these rules, John, when the Hope Project was going on. So I appreciate you putting that all together. I am concerned about the thought process that the 830G allows you to circumvent our zoning rules. So that's a real stumbling point for me that we'll be discussing further, I'm sure.
Okay. You good, Karen? All set, Karen?
That was it. Yeah,
Very
that
good.
was it.
Thank you. And Tom?
No, I'm all set. I'd be curious to dive into this a little deeper. Is there any other further impact we can be looking at how it's impacting Old Lyme? I'm sure this will come up with the pending proposals that are currently going to be presented in front of the zoning.
Yeah, this is really at the crux of the whole thing. It's gonna pervade, I think, everything that we're working on here. Okay, thank you, Tom. All right. If there are no further questions or comments on this topic, we can move on to the next update, which will be from Jen, who is, I think everyone knows that Jen's on the board of the Habitat for Humanity of Southeastern Connecticut, of Eastern Connecticut, not Southeastern Connecticut. And we posed a couple of questions to Habitat for Humanity around their partnering models, if they had anything to help us with the demand forecast, and if they had any tea leaves regarding public policy that we might be able to benefit from. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jen.
Okay, let me unmute. Yeah, my apologies for not sending out the slides earlier. That Michael just sent maybe an hour ago. I am on vacation, and the first day here in Florida, I have pulled my back, so I'm that's why I'm in bed. I've been staring at the ceiling for 5 days, so going stir crazy. But anyway, thank you. So yeah, I've been working with Habitat here in Eastern Connecticut for about 6 years, and I think everybody's familiar with Habitat just from a national standpoint. And here in Eastern Connecticut, which is this Habitat particularly covers New London County and Windham County, so Willimantic Tullen, some parts of Tullen and up there. So it's a pretty broad district from like here up the 95 corridor really to Rhode Island. And I just wanted to give you just a general overview of what we deal with on a local level and how we're a little bit different than some of the other affordable housing partnerships out there. So I hope the slides, if you have a chance to walk through them, if you have any questions at all, just let me know. But I wanted to point out one, if you have it up there, still in nationally, the poverty / struggle to have either extremely low income family, very low income or low income families, which are the three categories that are measured nationally by HUD, is 30% of the AMI, the adjusted median income, 50% and 80% of AMI. And when we talk about, the complex that was pitched last week around the Old Lyme, the 244 units, we say 30% of those have to be in the affordable category, and 15% of that 30% actually has to be below the 80% AMI, so either in the 30 to 50% category. So it's a very piecemeal, if you say 15 to 30% of 244 units. So you see how on Michael's slides and things that data that you all have already looked at, where we would have to build thousands of units just to get the little piece, to move the needle a little bit. So it's a struggle. And on top of that, Habitat is really focusing on home ownership, and where we would like to see there's really three benefits for that. Really is accountability, so making people safe, making people secure, and also putting in some effort into the house. So the basis is that the neighbors, the community helps you build the house. You put in sweat equity. So we do require a minimum of 400 hours from the homeowners who are selected for the houses to build their houses, to contribute to that. And we stick to that. We don't take really excuses for that. They do have to put in the 400 hours. And things have slowed down a little bit because of COVID, but really that's our plan. So we have built about 92 houses over the last few years, last 10 years, and they range from, they're pretty much a standard house, so it's not anything elaborate. It's a standard house, 2 to 3 bedrooms, generally 3 bedrooms. I have a slide in there on slide 5, if you're following along, that we have minimum requirements for income. So you do have to have a job. You do have to show income. We do run credit checks. It's a process to go through to apply to be a Habitat homeowner. The job requirement is there, obviously, because we need income. We are giving them a low interest mortgage. We are holding the mortgage for them, but yet we expect them to pay just like any other homeowner would pay on a mortgage, and it builds a sense of accountability for them, responsibility that they own the house, and almost always, in our cases, the land as well. And then after their 30-year mortgage is up, they're free to sell it. They're actually free to sell the house after 2 years. And we've never had that happen, but because they generally don't get better deals anywhere else. But we think that the ownership of the house is a crucial foundation for helping the lower income families get out of the situation they're in. So they're always in substandard housing. That's almost a criteria for actually being selected as a family, along with having the job. And then the way that they build wealth throughout their family and generational wealth, we feel is really through home ownership. And that's part of that would be the land ownership. So when we look at things like, could we rent the house to them and you rent the land to them and lease the land and sell the house to them? We generally haven't done that before. And we're delving now into 2-family homes, multifamily homes in the Norwich area. And we have several of those going up, 14 of them actually. And we think that that's also a wave of the future for us in this area, to develop multifamily homes. And somewhere, I believe in the slide deck, maybe towards the end, I have just a screenshot of the ones that we're building in Norwich. So it's just a duplex family home. And they're nothing elaborate, but certainly the families that we have take great pride in ownership. They do their own landscaping. They keep it up to date with everything as best they can. We have occasionally some that we have to foreclose on. One in the 6 years that I've been there. And that goes through the normal foreclosure process. So they're treated just like any other, creditor would treat a creditee. And we've, out of the 92 houses that we have had, I think we've had one turned back to us. And we certainly have right now, we unfortunately we've seen a big dip, and we do have 3 or 4 that are 30, 60, 90 days late on their mortgage payments. Couple that with the stimulus checks actually caught up on their mortgage payments, but we don't see really that being coming back anytime soon. So we're working with them on their mortgages and second mortgages to make sure that they are doing the best they can, and we'll do the best we can to help them out. But we do hold the mortgages for them in most cases. So that's sort of our angle here. We don't have any houses in Old Lyme. So we do have one in just about 80% of the other towns within the 2 counties. But it's not that we need to have a house in every town. That's not really the purpose. It's just that when we get property deeded to us, through some estates or something like that. Like in East Lyme, we have a case right now where property is being deeded to us, but maybe we don't want the property because it's not buildable. It might be little wetlands, which is one of the cases. And then we have to go through all these hoops to, give it back or sell it, get rid of it basically. So we do have a committee that goes out and looks at the assessment of any land that wants to be donated to us, and they assess the land for feasibility of putting a house on it, and that kind of thing. What's the best use for it? And so when we talk about, for instance, the McCullough property, if the land is retained by Old Lyme, and we're putting up a single family, only allowed to put up a single family house on that large of a property, it really isn't something that they would be interested in doing necessarily per se. We have 5 houses going on right now, so it's probably a lot for us anyways. But things like that are not typically done. So it would take something else. If we could buy the land, and build a house, that would be something, but we probably couldn't afford to do that if they're, $100,000 lots. So things like that all come into consideration. We do get a lot of land donations for sure. That's something we do, probably more than we could possibly build houses on with the budget that we managed to scrape up. So that's a little bit of an overview of us. We try to take care and maintain a personal relationship with the families. We are a faith-based organization. However, we don't have it's not any particular faith. It's just, that's how the company was founded back in 1976. And internationally, we tithe with a habitat in Africa. And so part of our donations that are donated to us go to our sister program in Africa that helps them build lots of shelters for needy people and children with a very, very small amount of money. So that's really our habitat. I don't know if there's any questions on that or anything, or I could go right to answering some of the questions that you posed.
Thanks, Jen. Particularly for going above while being laid out.
Oh, no worries.
I had one real quick question before you go on. Does Habitat certify their houses with the Department of Housing so that they actually count in the towards the 830G?
Yes, yes. Yep, they are. And in many cases, some of the mortgages we collaborate with are USDA mortgages. So the federal government actually knows about those right off the bat. Therefore, the state HUD would also know about those. But we are giving that data to the state monthly, actually.
Okay, so 830G certification, that's great. And and thanks, you answered the question I had, and actually you answered it a better question than I had about the McCulloch property and how it might fit together. So anyone else with questions for Jen before she goes on to some of the specific questions? I can run through. Harold?
No, I have no questions right now. That's Jen, very impressive. I think that's a lot of information. I've worked on some Habitat for Humanity structures, and I've really enjoyed it. So I think it's a great program. Thanks.
Thanks, Harold. John Zaccaro?
There we go. Yeah, hi, Jen. This is really impressive information and organization. You mentioned that you've worked with the USDA for financing some of these homes, and I was wondering, in Connecticut, is that the Rural Development Authority, or is it directly with the federal government?
Yeah, everything in Connecticut goes through the Connecticut arm of that, and I'll get back to you on whether that's the name of it, the Rural Authority or not. But yeah, I know that we do when working with Liberty and Dime Banks, we do go through something to do with the state of Connecticut for that. It's not directly federal, I don't think. But we have a lot of constraints with those mortgages too. There's a lot of standards and things that you have to do in addition to a normal mortgage with those USDA mortgages. So it is a bit of a extra effort, but it's a bit of a better loan too, I guess you could say.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, John. Peter?
I only make a comment. I was on the board of Habitat for Humanity of Southeastern Connecticut when it was of Southeastern Connecticut. And looking at that map of New London County, and it really is impressive how many towns. It's a bit embarrassing how many towns are participating. It's a bit embarrassing that Old Lyme is not among those towns, I must say. Both I and David Good, who was then the Reverend at First Congregational Church, were on the board at the same time, and no houses were built in Old Lyme. A shame.
We'll keep working on them, Peter. And we're working right now with St. Anne's and maybe trying to get some things drummed up with them as well.
Good.
Thank you. John Coughlin?
No questions. I've worked with you, Habitat for Humanity, for different projects and things over the years. So thank you very much, Jen.
Thanks, John. Karen?
Seems like, Jen, like they certainly are clustered in specific areas. Is that because that's where the gifts of landowner, where the land is more affordable, or is there a reason? Do you know?
Yeah, so specifically the 14 units that we just started on in New London was a gift, and it was the tract of land was just amenable to this cluster of housing. So it's almost like its own little development, if you can imagine. So so it's not necessarily the number of houses. It was just at that point, and when working with Norwich, we were able to get the zoning for that tract, so we could put up the 14 houses. So it was almost an anomaly, really. But sometimes we have people who just bequeath their houses. So we'll have to go out to the house, which is already there, it's already standing, and just really make repairs to it. So one in Griswold, two in Griswold that we recently had were standing houses. They just weren't really up to codes, if you know what I mean. And so we couldn't put a family in there without revising all the codes. So we do have to meet those for all these mortgages. So it's a refit on some houses. So, we just haven't had any, I honestly don't think we advertise enough in Old Lyme, and maybe even Lyme to get people more involved. So that is on our marketing plan to do. So you'll probably see more of not just me, but maybe other people from Habitat knocking on doors and going to the faith organizations here to drum up knowledge and awareness that we are here. And
I do need to point out that there's many towns that don't have any. Would you agree? It's not just Old Lyme.
Yeah, we just inherited. We merged with Willimantic in August of last year, and they were really as some of these nonprofit things are. They were the same 8 people that have been on the board there for the last 22 years, and were trying to work with Eastern Connecticut students to build houses. So they generally built one house every 2 years. So it was kind of slow going. So we hope that by merging with them and bringing our resources together with theirs, that we'll be able to hit more places in the Willimantic area. Windham County, sorry. Yeah, I agree though.
Thanks, Karen. Tom?
Hey, Jen, I was actually really impressed with the number of houses. I know that Middlesex Habitat doesn't seem to have that kind of a track record, so that's commendable there. You mentioned something about you do 2 and 3 bedroom units. So, is there it sounded like there was skewed more to one to the other. I mean, what are your demographics? What are you showing as the need?
Yeah, we really do more 3-bedroom, and it's generally though for a 4-person family. We've had families as large as 8, and that includes disabled children of over 30 years old, all the way down to a toddler, and so in the same household. So we have had families like that, but generally I would say it's a single female and 2 to 3 children. Occasionally there'll be, a couple and 2 children, but it's generally 2 children in most cases.
So when you said the 400 hours, is that 400? I thought that was determined by how many adults over 18. There's so many hours per adult over 18. Is that 400 hours or hours for a couple or for a single person? Or
it's for us, it's 400 hours for the family.
For the family. So if they have 2 18-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a mother and father, it's still just the 400 hours.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Yeah, and we see the adult children over 18 only count if they are receiving SSDI or some sort of support, so if their children are 19 or 20 years old and living at home, they don't really count in the number because they should be out working, et cetera, et cetera. So, but like I said, we have a lot of disabled children in these types of situations, so they do count.
I was pretty impressed also at the income level that you target. That actually gets the mortgages. That's pretty significant. That's got to be helping some people who really are on the fringe of poverty or close to poverty.
Yeah, and if you can imagine, the houses are, let's say, $127,000. The mortgages are for over 30 years, so you're looking at a payment of around $300 a month or less. So you can imagine how that helps a family, to actually put their money towards, different things, savings, maintenance of the house, et cetera. So that's really the benefit of it, is a lower cost mortgage. It's still a mortgage, though. It still is great on their credit report if they keep that up. And so it helps them build that, that strategy to get out of debt, because as everybody knows, you need credit for anything in this world. So it's a win-win, really. And like I said, this town gets the same amount of taxes off the house, and and that kind of thing. So it really creates a better community altogether, really.
So you said that someone could technically sell the house after 2 years. So what's stopping them from being in a house where they're only the house that probably would sell for 200,000? What's stopping them from being in for 2 years and then saying, I'm going to sell for 200,000?
They'll never be able to find anywhere else to live for $300 a month. So they maybe, if I guess the situation is like a situation would be single female, 3 children, and then 2 years down the road they get married. She finds a friend and gets married, and then they want to sell the house, and maybe the guy has money or something like that. I've seen that happen before. So that would be about the only case I've seen. If families enter into the mortgage, generally the families have stayed together, from what I know. I don't know anything about all 92 houses, but I know from the last 6 years, I've never seen anybody leave a house before a year or 2.
That's good. That's really
very rare.
Impressive. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Tom. So Jen, you already touched on some of the areas you're going to follow up on. So
Yeah. So Terry, who is Terry O'Rourke, is our executive director for this habitat, and she is very familiar with Hope and has worked with them in the past, just sort of bouncing ideas off and getting help on one issue or another. She has not worked with them per se on a deal or anything like that, on a specific project together, but is not saying that we can't. There are some Habitat for Humanity affiliate rules that we have to go by. So that's probably a constraining factor, because it is an international organization versus Hope, which is a more local, regional-based organization. So that would be the only restraint she could think of, is if the partnering causes Habitat International to come down and say, we don't do that, or we can't do that. So it would have to be a unique situation, she thought. As far as towns and municipalities, she's more than willing to work with any town or municipality to see what constraints or what thoughts they can bounce off of. She's been to a couple of things in Old Lyme here that we've had discussions around, the Halls Road Improvement Committee and things like that, just when she was available. So she's interested, for sure. Very interested, like I said, in keeping up with the McCullough property discussion, but probably more interested in, having land available to us, not having to purchase it, because we just don't have that kind of money. And then as far as the demand goes, we're using the same data, Michael, that you have already gleaned from, and others have already gotten from every database in Connecticut. And Habitat for Humanity International doesn't have any more regional or local specific things to southeastern Connecticut than the information that we already have in that database. And then for public policy, she did note that there is one proposal, and I wasn't aware of this, and I can't really find it on the government ct.gov website, but apparently there's legislation being proposed around zoning to further stimulate the 830G. So I guess there's a proponent of people who are not satisfied that 830G is actually moving the needle on anything fast enough across the state. So there could be some things coming up in a future legislative session. She didn't know this year or next or whatever, that might move that. And I did recently see an article last week about somebody in Darien, in the Darien Mirror, or Darien Examiner, I'm not sure the name of the paper, but I'll send it to you guys. It was about having Hartford controlling zoning and putting in restrictions around zoning for towns that not just around that are not 10% on 830G, but just zoning in general. So multifamily, I think it said something about not allowing single family housing and zoning and all kinds of things. So like I said, I tried to Google ct.gov to find out about this, but it's not on their legislature list for the upcoming sessions. So I'm not sure where this is coming from, but I'll do a little more work on that. Or I don't know, maybe some of you have heard of it. But it would seem to go pretty far into expanding. For instance, if there was subsidized housing projects in New London, that instead of being centered around New London, they have the ability to expand that radius to 15 miles from around that current location to propose additional subsidized housing locations. So there's all kinds of things, I guess, being talked about with all these things going on with the election. But like I said, I can't find it anywhere right now in writing. And she wasn't aware of anything else other than the need keeps being addressed. 1 in 4 families are living, in unaffordable, unsuitable housing in the area, and that number's been the same for about since 2001 or 2000s. So that's all I had, Michael, unless there was any other questions. I'll be happy to take anything back to Terry as well and the board to see if we could answer any other questions.
Thanks. By the way, I had seen some of that buzz on state influence of local zoning as well, and I haven't been able to pin it down to anything concrete. But there's a buzz out there in some of the newspapers, at least. Thanks very much again. I think I'm pretty convinced we want to keep Habitat on our radar screen as a potential partner, and definitely someone that we think about as we go through our recommendations. And I think we need to find a way to incorporate what Habitat does into our recommendations, so it's at least someone we go to as we're thinking about how to expand affordable housing in Oline. Really good. Any other questions or comments before we go to the next item? I'll just open it. Okay, hearing none. Next up, it's me. Okay. I had sent out just a pretty simplistic table that I drew from US Bureau Census data on population projections by age cohort in Connecticut, and it was broken down by town and age cohort. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, because since I did that, actually, as I was looking for Affordable Housing Commission ordinances, I came on that CCOG CECHA demand report that's much more current, much more sophisticated, and very importantly, it talks about households. They made an extrapolation to households and not just head count, which is much more useful. But anyway, based on the census data, I didn't see any big surprises. In the table I sent, you can see a little color code there where the blue is a shrinking cohort and the red is a growing cohort. Again, no big surprises. Some flux in the starter and workforce age cohorts, increase in the senior, pretty consistent. I also checked our neighboring towns and New London County and the state overall, and the pattern with some minor variances holds. But again, I'm not sure that even before I found that more sophisticated analysis, I wasn't sure that there was going to be anything decisionable in those data, particularly since it's still based on 2010 numbers, and the 2010 and the 2020 numbers are going to be out early next year, so we're going to have to revisit it anyway. But with all that in mind, it is a data point. But I think going forward, we're going to want to lean much more heavily on that CCOG CECHA report, that demand analysis from 2018. I haven't worked my way all the way through it, but just on a couple of skims, there's some very useful figures in there. Unfortunately, we're not part of CCOG. We're part of RiverCog. So Old Lyme isn't included in their analysis, but I've seen a few ways that we might be able to extrapolate what they've done with other data and kind of triangulate on the situation in Old And even so, in other data, we've seen how Old Lyme has some unique aspects, but in general, it follows a pattern of the shoreline and southeastern Connecticut, and actually the whole state, outside of cities, has a pretty well established pattern. So it may not be hard decisionable, but I think it'll be the basis for at least some further resurgence, and it'll be directional for us. Okay, if there's any question on that U.S. Census data, I'd be happy to take them. But overall, I think, given that we have access to the census data, it's going to be updated soon. We've got the ALICE report. We've got the Partnership for Strong Communities report. We now have this CCOG analysis on demand, and plus a few towns, Salisbury notably among them. I am going to distribute that piece of work from Salisbury. I'm feeling much better that we can at least set some direction for what the demand is going to be. It may not be down to digital precision on how many units we're going to have per age cohort or per income level, but I think we're going to be able to make some assertions about what is needed, where, and for whom, and that'll help with our findings and recommendations. So we'll touch on that part again as we go through the report outline, but I'll stop there and just take any questions. I'll go around quickly. Harold? You're muted, Harold. At least from
No.
There you go.
No questions or comments right now. I think this has been an excellent discussion. And Jen, I hope you recover quickly. Thank you.
Thanks, Harold. Jen, anything on the census data?
I just had one point out, since I'm on the school board too, just a note that the 0 to 4 age category today is whatever it looks like, 223. And if you go to 2040 with the 20 to 24-year-olds, that's like less than half of them left in the town. So from a school board perspective, it's a little bit unnerving that half of our teenagers are going to leave in 10 years.
Yeah. One data point. I think that I looked at the background for this. They look at some fertility data, some migration in and out. So I'm not exactly sure what the methodology is. But again, this is a data point. I wouldn't necessarily hang my hat on it. Thanks, Jen. John Zaccaro?
No, I'm all set, Michael. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, John. Peter? Peter, you're muted based on my dashboard here.
He said he was all set.
Okay, good. Thanks. John Coughlin?
I'm also all set. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Karen?
No questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. And Tom?
I just think that looks like I'm destined to move someplace else based on my age group. And it is a little scary. It doesn't bode well for the town, which is probably not that different for the entire state, that all our young people are leaving.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, if you believe this, it looks like we're going to turn into a retirement community. But we'll see what the 2020 data comes up with. And as I said, have a look at that CCOG demand analysis. It's much more sophisticated, and notably in there. And thanks, Tom, you reminded me of this. There's not necessarily a correlation between decreasing headcount and decreasing number of households. So that's something to really look at, is that basing the demand on households and not individuals gives a different picture sometimes.
Yeah, I think in fact, Michael, that report says that it'll be additional 7,000 households of some variety in the next 10 years across the region, not in Old Lyme.
I think it's worth putting that in the Salisbury report on our next agenda. Let's give that a read and go through it, because again, I haven't read them both in depth and really dug into them, but I think there's some really valuable stuff in both of those. Okay. I think we're wrapped there. Just on additional information under 5.4. That we're at? Yeah, 5.4. So we have that CCOG report that I sent out. I've got that Salisbury 2010 Advisory Committee report that turned up in my search for ordinances. I will send that out after this meeting. I also have a non-scientific survey of 10 development projects that have gone on between Essex and Old Saybrook all the way out to Pawcatuck. You may have seen recently in the day that there's a new development going up on the Pawcatuck River. And no huge surprises, but it does point out, and again, it's not scientific or comprehensive, but it does point out that not unlike Habitat, the not-for-profit sponsored projects tend to be 100% affordable. And as you get into some of the for-profit and privately developed developments, it trends downward towards the 30% minimum. Although there's recent developments in Old Lyme and that one in Pawcatuck that are up in the 60 to 75% affordable.
What recent development? What recent development in Old Lyme was more than 30%?
All three of them. Those single unit, the ones that came.
Single units. Oh.
So we haven't had any multifamily developments I'm aware of.
Oh, okay.
So it's not Old Lyme, but at least I saw that the Economic Development Commission in Stonington actually supported that project out in Pawcatuck. And that, I don't know if there were any incentives involved there, but I'll send that out as well. I got to have a little bit more research to do on it to see to hopefully try to explain some of the information in there. So there's that. I haven't distributed this, but Harold sent me a very interesting page from quite a while ago on the Old Lyme affordable housing. As a historical reference, it'll be a good page for our report. I had mentioned that that Connecticut Mirror article on the development application in Woodbridge that is actually looking for a more comprehensive zoning change, if I'm reading it correctly, but I'll send that as well. And Tammy hasn't joined us, but I believe she was going to be doing something on number of bedrooms and what the demand was at the number of bedrooms level. Some of what Tom and Jen touched on earlier. Okay, that's what I had. I'll go around. Any other pieces of background information that we should be aware of or that we want to distribute? Harold?
I have nothing.
Okay.
Nope.
Thanks, Harold. Jen?
No, just one thing that I just remembered, though, that the lack of sewer capacity is the number 2 deterrent for multifamily and cluster homes. So just keep that in mind.
We're in water. John Zaccaro?
No, I don't have anything.
Thanks. John Coughlin? John Coughlin, you're not muted that I can see.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, nothing, thanks.
Great. Peter?
Oh, nothing to add.
Thank you, Peter. Karen?
No additions from me.
Thanks, Karen. And Tom?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. At this point, I have a working session on the agenda. The overall objective here is to really start our shift from information gathering and sharing into assembling our findings and recommendations into the beginnings of a final report that we're aiming for early next year. And the good news that we got is, since it now looks like we'll have the opportunity to pass the baton onto a new commission that'll be carrying our work forward. It takes some of the pressure off of us coming up with less of an early draft 830J plan and more of some of the thinking and the recommendations and the areas for further work that the commission will pick up on as they move towards an 830J plan. And as a result, I think maybe we can start to bring some of our analysis to a close, and areas that are incomplete, we can flag it as needing additional work, and leave off what we found and some suggestions on what direction to take. But I think we'll be able to do that with some confidence that what we do will be picked up and continued. So that's good news. So as we start that shift, the first item we had was, and this is actually a specific item in our charge, which is congruity with the 2020 Plan of Conservation and Development. And I know that John Zaccaro and Harold have talked about that in the context of the legal analysis and the regulatory analysis. But I just wanted to give Harold a chance to talk about that. As I think we all know, Harold's the chair of the Planning Commission, and they're in the late stages of coming up with the 2020 Plan of Conservation and Development. So Harold, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. We are still in the draft section of our Plan of Conservation and Development, and we have talked about affordable housing within the POCD. And so we were supposed to have a meeting last week, but there was a concern about a positive COVID-19 at Town Hall, and so our meeting was canceled, just to be safe. So I'm meeting with some of the staff tomorrow morning. We're going over some comments. We're having another meeting this Thursday outside to have discussions on the POCD. And so when we get more to a final process or final document, I'm going to be sending out sections of the POCD for review and comment from this group, from the affordable housing. We are encouraging it. There are some restrictions, and I think Jen mentioned something about the septic and sewer systems. And so one of the things that we're looking at right now is that the sewers that are going in for the beach areas are based on the the Clean Water Act, rather. And so there are restrictions. So the restrictions say that they're supporting existing structures, but not supporting economic development. And so even when Mark came to us last meeting and talked to us about hooking up with East Lyme, there's a conflict there. So we have to look at trying to resolve that conflict. So, because it says that, if he's going to put 224 units in this area, well, our regulations currently state that you can't put something into an area that can't be supported by a local system.
Right.
And so it's going to be I think it's going to be interesting, challenging, and it's probably going to go to the courts. But like I said, once I feel comfortable in that we have a draft that is reasonably complete, I will send sections out to the affordable housing members. I'll send them to Michael, and then he'll distribute them. And so I'm hoping to do this sooner than later. And you mentioned about a town meeting at some point, and we need that as well. So this pandemic has really given us all a challenge. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Harold. A couple of things. I guess to your last point, I thought I saw somewhere that for deadlines that occur during the declared state of emergency in Connecticut, there's an automatic 90-day extension. I don't know if you're aware of that or.
I am, but I think the process. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we want to get this thing out. We want to get this thing done. The longer it lingers, the more times people are going to, I guess, provide comments, and the longer it seems to drag out. I like to get things done in a timely manner, and so I'm yeah, the extension's appropriate, but I'd still like to get this thing on the street as soon as possible.
Thank you. I understand and agree, actually. Um, so in the meantime, I guess I'll ask a general question. Have you seen anything in our deliberations? And I'll leave that question open as we go into setting goals that Peter's going to talk about. Have you seen anything in the early direction we're setting that is clearly out of alignment with the POCD as it's shaping up?
No. As I mentioned in previous discussions, part of our challenges is that, we think accessory housing is really a strong point. And I think we have a lot of it in O-line that's undocumented. And so one of our challenges is that no one wants to admit if they have that kind of a situation, because then someone's going to say, well, now you've been collecting income for so long and you've not reported it, or there's some other legal thing. So, no, we're in favor of it. It's just, we just have to start looking at some of our regulations and, supporting the people that are trying to do it. And I felt bad for Hope. I mean, it was a great project, but I think the location was just extremely challenging. So there are other areas in O-Lime. We have a very limited amount of open space or available building space in town. And so we have to look at what we can do and how we can do it.
Good. Thanks. Two things. First, on that accessory thing, I'm going to send out that Salisbury report on their research. It's a long read, but based on a quick skim, I saw they had dealt with accessory apartments, and they got creative. And I'm pretty sure I read that part of their approach was an amnesty program. So have a look at that when I send it.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So it's a heavy read, but worth it, I think. So I'll get that out right after the meeting. Have a look.
All right,
there.
terrific. Thank you.
Okay, and to the second thing you said about the buildable land, I had talked to Dan Beret a little while ago about something different, and we got talking about capacity analysis, and he mentioned two things. One is that the RiverCog actually has software to do a build-out analysis. It's not probably within our scope and timeline to get it done, but that may want to turn up in our recommendations to do some work with the RiverCog to look at that. And the other, he had mentioned some work that he believed had been done by Barbara Gaudio, I think, on looking at capacity for development. And I was just going to ask if you're aware of that, and if there's anything that we could use for our purposes.
Well, first of all, I think, when you talked about talking to zoning, I think it'd be very good to have Dan join us at some point. Second thing is that, Barbara she's an incredible resource. And so I can't remember if we've talked about this, but I will check with her. I'll talk about it. I'll get back to you.
And again, if not for our short-term work product, at least have it on the radar screen for
long-term.
Carry this forward.
Yep.
Okay. I took up some of the bandwidth there. Let me go around and see if anybody else has questions or comments, and I'll start with Jen. You're still muted on my end, Jen.
I keep hitting the space bar too many times. I said no, thank you. Thank you for your info, Harold.
Thanks, Jen. John Zaccaro?
Nope, I'm all set.
Thanks, John. Peter? Peter, if you said something, I didn't hear it at least.
He just dropped off, so he might have dropped.
Okay, we'll wait for him to come back in. Karen?
Nothing to add.
Thanks, Karen. John Coughlin?
No, thank you, Harold. Great job.
Okay. Tom?
Nothing further. I look forward to the full report. Sounds good.
Okay. Did I miss anybody? All right. So this is Peter was next up on the agenda, and he just dropped. So I'm just waiting a sec to see if Peter finds his way back in. And if he has not, we at least have the document that Peter sent around. And at this point, we can switch to, let's see. Oh, he's back. Okay. Stand by. Peter's reconnecting.
Hi, I lost my internet connection.
Welcome back.
Hi, where are you?
Just coming up on your agenda item, and you dropped. So
Okay.
you're up.
Okay. When I first began thinking about goals, it occurred to me that what I began thinking about was the fact that people who are taking advantage, builders who are taking advantage of 8-30G, will assign just 30% of their units to affordable. And I wanted to see how many units would we have to add to the 5,021 we still have to get up near, 5%, 6%, 10%, whatever. And that's contained in the notes that I sent you folks. There's a graph that shows that it's you're talking about several thousand houses if you want to get even 10% of the housing units. You'd have to add an additional 2,200 houses, something on that order. And that got me to start thinking about this whole problem from the other way around. I think that approaching it from 8-30G is the wrong way to look at it. And the Partnership for Strong Communities data clearly show that Old Lyme is tending to have a shortage of housing for families who are just starting out in their careers, for people who work in town but can't afford to live in town, and for retired people who want to downsize and yet still be able to move about, need some mobility. And that led me to think about what's in place, what's available for building more affordable housing. And that's pretty much what I've gone over in those notes. It does seem to me that the Plan of Conservation and Development is in fact the strategy or plan for the whole town, and that it's essential that it be fine-tuned to address these questions of housing inadequacies for those three groups that I spoke of. And the reason I say that is because the 2010 Plan of Conservation and Development really didn't do that. It alluded to affordable housing, but it was really in passing. So it really didn't provide an overall plan for how the town was going to grow in that direction and how it was going to benefit inhabitants. I think there are several opportunities. There are several statutes. There's inclusionary zoning, which is contained in the general statutes 8-2I, and we can think about incorporating that into into our plan. There's the IHC, the Incentive Housing Zone program, which also provides some funding for planning. And so I think that can be incorporated in. And then I think we can think about potentially using town land that we already have, such as the parking lot near Halls Road, the parking lot onto I-95 that's near Halls Road. There's a parking lot on 4 Mile River Road where I live. I don't think that's particularly suitable for affordable housing, but at least you could look at it. There are areas behind the police stations, areas behind fire stations, all of this. So there's town property that we could think about using. And then there are incentives that we can put into our own zoning, the inclusionary zone, that would make it more attractive for builders to build. And I think that may be the way we want to approach it. And I think that's something that the POCD should provide a road. The POCD is our blueprint for how we want to proceed, and that should provide a roadmap for that. So that's the direction I'm coming from, rather than thinking about number of units that a target number of units. I'm thinking of how do we want to propose this in a sort of top-down way with a roadmap. And we may want to think about even suggesting that we get professional help. I mean, it will cost the town money, but again, there are funds for doing that in some of these statutes that I've alluded to. There is a funding available. So I think that's really where I'm coming from in this goals. Rather than setting a particular number, we ought to have a broad strategy for addressing this. Any questions?
Thanks, Peter. Where I've seen towns actually set numbers, they appear to be I'm not going to say arbitrary, but based on what they can do versus what, informed by some directional sense of what was needed. So it was it was complicated to come up with a number, but I agree that actually setting a strategy and a direction.
I think that, I certainly think that we could work towards a number, but I don't think we're going to get out from under 8-30G, but I think we can work around it. That's, I guess, what I'm saying.
Right.
That would be my strategy for going forward, not trying to produce a number that we're going after, but figuring out where do we want to put where do we want the commission that's going to follow us to put its efforts. I think the commercial areas along Halls Road, the marketplace and the shopping center are two areas that we ought to think about potentially adding affordable housing to. They fit under the incentive housing very neatly.
Yeah, and to your other point there, in addition to the POCD, there's going to be this 830J affordable housing plan. So I would see those as two parts where potentially, and I'll look to you for comment on this, Harold, where the POCD could maybe lay some of the groundwork, the regulatory and land use groundwork, and the 830J affordable housing plan would bring that forward in sharper context for affordable housing. And that's where maybe some of these directions and goals could be set. But let me, you caught me, Harold, when you mentioned that the sewers down on 156 are under the Clean Water Act, and that excludes the possibility of using them for economic development. And then you look at the incentive housing zone statute that Peter just talked about, and that specifically looks at areas where there's infrastructure like sewer and water. So I hope we don't get caught in any of these. I hope we don't. I don't expect that we won't, but I hope we don't. But anyway,
Sorry.
no, that's okay. Go ahead, Harold. I was going to start with you anyway.
No, I think Peter rather, brings up some great points. We have never offered incentives to contractors to do affordable housing, and all the developments that we've had, in the last 20 plus years on planning has been single family homes, upper scale, 2,000 to 3,000 foot homes, square foot homes.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's one of the things that one of the things that we've added to the POCD this year is that we need to provide incentives for people not only to give land,
Yes.
but also for developers. If cut up a deal. Is there, in other words, you put in so many things, and you put in so many single family houses, you put in one duplex. Will they get a tax cut? Will they get some benefit? And I think, Peter had a good point on that we have to, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. There's a monetary gain in that. And so if we can look at our regulations and look at how we encourage development in certain areas, I think that's going to be a huge step. And I think that's what other community towns do. I think Old Saybrook does some of that stuff. They'll give, contractors or developers some bennies in there so that they can get what they want. And I think that, we're blessed with the community we have, but I think sometimes we've been a little bit stayed on what we are doing that frustrates people from coming in and working with us. And I think we're going to have to do some changes.
Tom had mentioned that Madison operating developers, and I think Tom, you mentioned that Madison had gotten to the point where they had some affordable housing development going in that was not under 830G even. It was just based on a partnership between the town and
Yes, Madison kind of has 830G light, if you will. They have incentives for the developers to, when they come before them, I think they go a little easier on them if they include affordable housing within their development. And that's how they've gotten some, they're not getting 30% of them, but they might get 10% affordable housing in a development as opposed to 0.
So is that something like an inclusionary incentive differentiated from an inclusionary regulation?
I know it's on the books. I know they have their own set of rules on the books in Madison that addressed it. That was their way to incentivize it. And it was in a particular part of town where they wanted to incentivize people to do so. Harold, you mentioned Old Saybrook, and I know Hope's first development in Old Saybrook, somebody was looking to build new homes, and there was a house already on the property that was a duplex. And part of the deal was the half of one of the duplexes got turned into affordable housing. That's how they got their first unit, was somebody, you put a development in, and that was their incentive. It's like you said, getting somebody at the table to make those suggestions.
Tom, while you're there, any other questions or comments for Peter?
The other thing I was curious, what are you talking about, the commuter lot on Halls Road? Or what parking lot were you talking about at the
Where
town
on
owns?
Halls Road? I was
Yeah.
thinking, well, there's a big empty foundation on the in the shopping center area.
Okay.
Ever. That's one area. The other thing I was thinking about on that side was maybe building, reducing, alleviating the height restrictions and building apartments perhaps above, or multifamily units above that. I mean, that's just a thought. On the other side, it doesn't seem like the marketplace doesn't seem like a particularly attractive place when I first looked at it to think about putting in, houses above commercial structures or housing above commercial structures. But who knows? I'm not an architect, and architects may have a very different view of that. So that's another possibility. On both sides, I think using the incentive housing and the what's the other term for it, for housing for economic growth, HEG, housing for economic growth, using that, and there's a little bit of money available from the state in the pre-development, and they're in two phases, the pre-planning stage and sort of the pre-development stage. There are grants available for using to plan those kinds of things, both for legal and planning purposes.
That's when you might want to bring a consultant on or somebody who knows those laws.
Exactly.
Because otherwise, you're never going to be able to get around those.
Right. And I'm thinking that going, seeking professional help in some of these areas ought to be part of the overall plan. And if there are grants available to pay for part of that, I know that would make Tim happy.
And there are.
It'll make all the townspeople happy too.
Yes.
Okay, let's keep moving through the group. Jen, questions or comments for Peter?
Oh, just sort of a point on that. I know that I see Harold laughing because I know the HRIC, the Halls Road Improvement Committee, looked at all those things as well. And maybe what's lacking in all of that work is just getting a developer, not like a Hope or a Habitat, but an actual developer to come in and say, what would it take to put you there? And there are firms that are subsidiaries of national real estate companies that do specialize in that type of property, and they know all the ins and outs of all the regulations and what goes where or what it would take to get their margins correct. Get it for the right price, get the tax abatements or whatever deal, they want to work with the city to make it affordable for them to come in and get a 10% out of it. But without knowing they're going to get 10% out of it, they're not even going to come near it. So if we put too many restrictions on them, or we try to control too much of the process, I feel like we're trying to, at times with all these committees, say, okay, well, Habitat, you can come in and look at the McCullough property, but we're not going to sell you the land. And this has to be 3 acres, and you can't put up bug zappers. So, things like that. And so everything seems to have a condition with it. And so if we just get a private enterprise capitalist guy to come in here, a person to come in here and say, this is what it's going to take to put me in Old Lyme. And I can do X, Y, or Z on a scale of 1, 2, and 3, depending on what you want and how much you're willing to work with us. Versus us as non-experts trying to come up with all these ideas about where an apartment building might go. That land's not even owned by us. The guy that owns Big Y Development is owned by somebody, so maybe he doesn't ever want to sell it. So things like that have to be in consideration. I'm just thinking maybe we just need another type of perspective, another lens to look through. That's just
very well put, Jen. I mean, that's absolutely right. You're right on. I mean, that's spot on. Very good.
Great job, Jen.
We should go on then.
Rookie luck.
but we will. John Zaccaro.
Yes, I think that the focus on the town being proactive is absolutely perfect. I think it's the right way to go. I think that the danger of a developer taking advantage of 8-30G shouldn't be minimized. I think it's a real danger. It's sort of like email hacking. Maybe it hasn't happened to you yet, but eventually you're going to be a target. And that takes control over what happens to the town and the town's ability to meet these goals and to provide for the needs of its citizens away from the town. And we want to avoid that. And that's why I think my only suggestion would be, and maybe this document isn't the place for it, but I think that we ought to either recommend in general outline form or come up with ourselves a path to getting a moratorium while the town is being proactive in these other areas that you've outlined in the goals document. I think I think a moratorium is a very achievable goal for the town of Old Lyme based on what I've seen, and that would alleviate some of the pressure that the burden shifting of 8-30G threatens us with.
That's a good point, and I think that I think you raised that before, and I think that's very good. I think having a working proactively towards having a strong POCD and a strong affordable housing plan, working towards that puts us in a good position to do exactly that, to get a moratorium. I think I hadn't really thought about that, but I think that's really right on.
Thanks. And actually, Peter, to your point earlier, that would actually provide us with a quantitative target if it was keyed to the moratorium rather than exemption.
Yeah.
Okay, Peter, John Coughlin.
The question I had was, I mean, I think it was great, Peter, what you did, but the questions I have, the areas that you pointed out, like for instance, the thing on Halls Road, parking lots, is the same problem that was brought up before. Is the governor or the limiter on this is going to be septic and water. So my question is, do we march forward with the single unit thing ideas and have the town manage it, and then create a plan for developer to come in? And then also I have another question. With the new HUD restrictions lifted, is that going to change the regulations and then also the money to actually push these things forward?
Don't know. Can't answer your question. Don't know.
Neither do I. That's why I brought it up.
John, can you say more about what that situation is with HUD restrictions?
Well, in July the HUD removed a lot of the restrictions for, or the mandates for affordable housing. They actually steered the affordable housing to targeted areas. I don't know a whole ton of it. I was just reading on it the other day, which I could look into it a little more if you'd like. But basically, they've gotten rid of individual mandates for every single town, every city to have something, where they're actually pumping billions of dollars into enterprise zones, as compared to, everybody has it. So just, and I'm wondering if the money's going to dry up, because a lot of the money that was backing this stuff, I think, was federally funded, and some state, but that was also driven by federal dollars. And I know the federal dollars are going to the targeted areas. So.
Yeah, if you could flesh that out a little bit for our next minute, that'd be good. And now that as you put it that way, I recall seeing that too.
Yeah, I actually, I will try to dig into it and come up with some credible information on that for next time.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, don't know anything about that.
Karen.
I have lots of stuff on this. First off, I think John is spot on that moving towards a moratorium. We already established in our very first meeting that there was no way that we were going to make that 10% goal. So to look in that direction really is futile. But something tangible or something documentable is very valuable. I have to say we keep talking about developers coming in. We're assuming that developers want to come in. You know, how much development, how many homes, how many apartment complexes are all around us? Why do we believe that Old Lyme is the gem that these developers want and need to come in? So that's something we think we need to ask ourselves. I mean, our goal is to increase all types of housing, which is absolutely what Peter has listed here. But I do question that the need that we put in for smaller, more densely situated homes near the town center and shopping areas, desirable proximity to public transportation. Why do we assume that? Why do we assume that's important? And then also under the 830G, I question the verbiage where we had the developer can invoke immunity from town zoning regulations. I think that's a bit stronger than the freedom that they have to move forward on these projects. So I think we need to caution about putting that sort of green light into our documents. And the last one that I had concerns with is the town property for affordable housing, because I feel like the areas that have been identified are not town owned and wouldn't be suitable for any housing on them either. So I think it's good for us to move forward and put some stuff down on paper, see what sticks and see what doesn't stick. But I think in many ways, we're making lots of assumptions. You know, everybody keeps talking about Halls Road, Halls Road, Halls Road. You know, to Jen's point, they're privately owned. What makes us think they want residential properties in their businesses? So I think we have to caution to jump on the bandwagon for something that may be outside of our scope. That's all.
Okay.
Hey, just a question on that from Karen's point. The property that's currently for sale between the bank and, you know, on the corner there, between the bank and the treasurers, is that zoned residential / multifamily? So does anybody know what that zoning is?
I'm sorry, there's noise going on behind me and I couldn't hear what you.
Oh, sorry, Peter. There's a lot for sale between the bank on the corner of Halls and 156 and Treasures, or the gas station, I guess it is, Shell or whatever. That lot, is it zoned for just commercial use? I'm just curious.
I don't know for sure, but I think it's commercial.
Yeah, I think it's commercial. But I'm not certain.
It's interesting. Every time someone's tried to come in to do something around Treasures has been very opposed to it, and they've been successful. So, yeah, I mean, there's some very interesting stuff. Karen, your comments were just, I think, right on a lot of things. You know, it's like if they try to put affordable housing down on Halls Road. Who's going to build it? Who's going to want it? Who's going to live there? Good comments. I'm sorry. I'm taking over, Michael. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Harold. This is why we're here. You know, this is the mode we're shifting into, is to try and pull this together. So, John.
I wanted to agree with Karen about the sentence in the report that says that a developer can invoke immunity from the town zoning regulations. Although the overarching point, I think, is a valid one, whether or not it's based on the assumption that someone will want to do this here. And the overarching point is that a developer might find the alleviation or the burden shifting in the zoning realm attractive enough to do the bare minimum, which will never get us anywhere. The bare minimum for affordable housing when they come here to develop which won't get us anywhere in terms of the full goal of 10%. So I think that's still the point can be made, but it's not really immunity from zoning regulations. It's the fact that the burden has now shifted to the town, and the town's the burden is very high for the town to deny someone's application. So it takes a lot of control away from the town. So I agree with that. As far as the assumption, yeah, it's true, it's an assumption, but I still think I like my email analogy. Eventually they're going to come, because I worked for 30 years. I was counsel to a nonprofit housing developer, and they were constantly looking for places. It was like, they developed 55,000 units across the country, and they were always looking for places. And if they were still around today, Old Lyme would have eventually been on their target. Of course, they did 100% affordable housing, not 30%, but still. So that's all I have to add.
Thanks, John. I think I hit everybody once, but at least once. Any other comments? Okay, thank you, Peter. This really gave us something to think about, and we're going to want to continue on. We're going to want to pick up here and move into continue on this pulling it together phase, and look at the outline and start to actually tee up our recommendations. Noting that it's 7:30, we've been at this for a couple hours now. The next agenda items on looking at the outline and that map are going to take some time. So if folks are amenable, or let me just ask, do you want to keep going, or do you want to pause here and potentially go for a special meeting, pick up on looking at the outline and to pull it together?
I'd like to finish up. I got some other stuff to do, so I can't really stick any longer.
Yeah, I'd like to make a break, and we continue. A special meeting's fine with me.
Okay, maybe we can. I agree, because we got a ways to go yet on this agenda item. So I'll propose 2 weeks from now on November 2nd. Is that bad? Is that definitely bad for anybody that's here?
Well, it's my birthday, so.
Say it again?
I said it's my birthday, so.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, if you send a pizza to my house, I'll be happy to join on November 2nd.
Got it. Just don't have the candles put on the pizza pie.
No, I'm joking. Of course, I'll meet on November 2nd if everyone else does.
That's fine.
Anyone else?
I'm fine.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll defer the rest of the working session to a special meeting. Let me just run out the agenda here then. So that would bring us to any other business. Actually, Harold, help me for a sec here. By deferring an agenda item, do we need a motion and vote to modify the agenda, or can we just carry that without?
Yes, actually, that'd be wise.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to defer agenda items 6.3 and 6.4 to either a special meeting, if we can pull it together, or our next regular meeting.
All right, I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we defer item 6.3 and 6.4 to either a special meeting or our next regularly scheduled meeting.
I second the motion.
Who was that second? Was that John?
Yes, John Coughlin.
Great. Okay, any discussion? I'll take the roll on this. Harold?
Yes.
John Zaccaro?
Aye.
Happy birthday. Peter Cable?
Aye.
Peter, sorry, Peter, you're an alternate. I couldn't have called you. John Coughlin?
Yes.
Thank you, Karen.
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
and I'll add to that. So we will shift 6.3 and 6.4 to a special or our next regular meeting, which brings us to item 7, other business or matters arising. Does anyone have any other business to bring before the committee? Okay, hearing none. Item 8 is public comment. I don't see that anyone has connected other than the members of the committee, but I'll just pause for a few seconds to see if there is anyone that I can't see that has public comment. Okay, hearing none. We'll move on to adjournment. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, John. Sakaro,
I'll second.
second.
I'll second.
That was Karen. Thanks, Karen. Okay, we'll do the roll again. Harold,
So moved.
it was
Yes.
moved. Yes,
Yes.
good. John Z,
Aye.
John C,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
and me, and we're good. Thank you, everyone. This is a long meeting, but we covered a lot of ground, and I think we made a lot of progress. So I'll be sending out some additional material and looking for that Monday, November 2nd, for a special meeting to go through the outline and the map of our work and identify any cleanup information we have. But I'm thinking we're in pretty good shape, and we can get into this discussion about what the recommendations and findings actually look like. So thank you all very much for your engagement and your work in bringing this forward. And with that, I will say good night and see you soon.
Have a
All
great
right.
evening.